What you think I could have done? I took the job because it was quiet. The kind of quiet most people avoid, but I was actually looking for. Something simple, something predictable. Long hours with almost nothing happening, just me, a desk, a few security cameras, and the steady hum of fluorescent lights that never quite let the place feel completely dark. And at first, that's exactly what it was. Uneventful in the best way possible. The kind of job where time moves slowly but safely, where you can sit back and let the night pass without thinking too much about anything. And the building itself wasn't anything unusual, just an office complex on the edge of town, empty after hours, locked up tight with only one entrance monitored from the inside. And my job was simple. Watch the screens, make a few routine checks. I can make sure nothing out of place happened, and for the first few nights nothing did. Just empty hallways, closed doors, and the occasional flicker from one of the older cameras that I quickly learned to ignore because old systems always glitch. That's normal. That's what I told myself, and it worked, at least for a while, until one night when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. One of the hallway cameras showed a door slightly open, just enough to create a thin line of darkness where there shouldn't have been one. And I remember staring at it for a few seconds, trying to recall if I had checked that door earlier, because I was sure I had. I was always careful about that, making sure everything was locked exactly how it should be. But maybe I missed it. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. And so I grabbed my keys and went to check it in person, walking down the hallway with that same steady hum of lights overhead, everything looking exactly like it did on the screen, until I reached the door, and it was closed, completely. No gap, no movement, nothing out of place, and I stood there for a moment just looking at it, feeling slightly confused but not concerned, because things like that happen, cameras lag, angles play tricks on you. So I brushed it off and went back to the desk. But when I looked at the monitor again, the door was open, exactly the same as before, just a thin line of darkness where it shouldn't be. And I felt something shift, not fear exactly. Just a quiet unease that didn't have a clear reason yet. And I checked the timestamp, thinking maybe the footage hadn't refreshed. But it was live, perfectly synced. He's showing something that didn't match what I had just seen in person, and I told myself not to overthink it. That there had to be a simple explanation. So I stayed where I was and watched, waiting to see if anything would change. But it didn't. The door remained slightly open on the screen, unmoving, silent, and eventually I got up again, walking back down the hallway for a second time, slower this time, more aware of the silence around me. And when I reached the door again, it was still closed, exactly as it should be, and I didn't open it, I didn't touch it. I just stood there for a few seconds before turning around and heading back, because something about it didn't feel right anymore. And when I returned to the monitors, the door was closed on the screen too, like it had corrected itself, like nothing had ever been wrong. And that should have been the end of it. Something small, something easy to ignore. But it wasn't, because the next night it happened again, and the night after that, always the same door, always the same slight opening, always only visible on the camera, never in real life. And I stopped checking it after a while because every time I did, it felt like I was confirming something I didn't want to understand. So I started pretending it wasn't there. Just another glitch, just another problem with old equipment, until the night it changed. Because that night, the door wasn't just open. It was wider than before, enough to see into the room beyond. And I hadn't seen inside that room before. It was supposed to be empty, just storage, nothing important. But on the screen, it didn't look empty. It looked darker than it should have been. It like the light wasn't reaching all the way in, and I leaned closer to the monitor without realizing it, trying to make out what I was seeing. And that's when I noticed something move. Not clearly, not enough to define. Just a subtle shift in the darkness, like something adjusting its position. And I froze. Not because I understood what it was, but because I didn't. And I stayed there watching, waiting for it to happen again. But the image stayed still, the doorway open, the room beyond it quiet and unchanged. And after a while, I forced myself to look away, telling myself it was nothing, that my eyes were playing tricks on me, that shadows can move when you stare at them too long, and I almost believed it, until I heard something behind me. A soft sound, not loud, not sudden, just enough to be noticed. I know, like a chair shifting slightly against the floor, and I turned around immediately, expecting to see something out of place, but everything was exactly how I left it, the room empty, the desk untouched, and I told myself it was just the building settling again, just another normal sound. But when I turned back to the monitors, the door on the screen was closed, completely, like it had never been open at all, and I felt that same quiet unease return. Stronger this time, because now it wasn't just something I was seeing, it was something changing, something reacting. And I didn't check the hallway again that night. I stayed at the desk until morning, watching the screens more carefully than before, noticing every small flicker, every shadow, every moment where something didn't feel exactly right and nothing else happened. Not that night. Not the next few. Everything returned to normal. Or at least it looked normal, and I started to relax again, convincing myself that whatever it was had stopped, that it was just a series of coincidences. Nothing more, until the night I heard my name, because that's when everything changed in a way I couldn't ignore. I was sitting at the desk just like every other night, watching the monitors, letting the quiet fill the space around me when I heard it clearly. My name, spoken softly from somewhere behind me, and I turned around immediately, expecting to see someone standing there. But there was no one. Just the same empty room, the same stillness. And I stayed there for a moment, listening, waiting, trying to understand where the sound had come from. But nothing followed. No footsteps, no movement, no indication that anyone else was there. When I told myself it had to be my imagination. That long nights can do that to you, that the mind starts filling silence with things that aren't real. But then I heard it again, closer this time. The same voice, the same calm tone, saying my name like it had been waiting for me to respond, and I didn't. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just sat there staring at the monitors, trying to keep my breathing steady, trying not to acknowledge it at all, because something inside me was telling me that if I did, it would change something I wouldn't be able to undo. And the voice didn't repeat after that, not that night, not out loud, but the feeling stayed. That sense of being noticed, of not being alone even when everything looked empty. And I started to notice small things after that. Things that didn't quite fit. Like one of the chairs being slightly out of place when I knew I hadn't moved it, or one of the monitors flickering at the exact moment I looked away from it, like something was just outside of where I was paying attention, and I tried to ignore it, to keep treating it like nothing, but it got harder each night because the quiet wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't empty. It felt occupied. Like something was there with me, not doing anything, not showing itself, just existing in the same space, waiting, and I stopped taking the job seriously after that. Not in the way you'd expect. I still showed up, still sat at the desk, still watched the screens, but I stopped questioning things, stopped trying to understand what was happening, because it felt easier that way, easier to accept it as part of the night, part of the job. Like something that didn't need to be explained, and eventually I left, not because of one specific moment, not because something dramatic happened, but because I realized something that I couldn't ignore anymore. That whatever was there didn't need to do anything to be real. It didn't need to be seen. It didn't need to make sense. It just needed to be noticed. And once you noticed it, it stayed with you. Not in the building, not in the cameras, but in the quiet moments after, when everything around you feels still. And even now, sometimes when I'm alone, when the room is silent and nothing seems out of place, I still get that same feeling, that same awareness, like something is there just outside of where I'm looking, waiting, patient, and already familiar with me in a way I can't explain.